Before Brigham Young, obedience in the church was largely framed as loyalty to shared belief and covenant. Members followed Joseph Smith as a charismatic prophet, but the church was still young, fluid, and often divided. Authority existed, but it was personal, contested, and unstable. When Brigham Young took leadership after Joseph Smith's death, that changed, not just in practice, but in meaning. Obedience became something more structured, more absolute, and more closely tied to survival. Brigham Young led a people who had been expelled, attacked, and driven across the plains. For him, unity was not abstract theology. It was a matter of life and death. In that environment, obedience was no longer simply about spiritual alignment. It became a safeguard against chaos. Sermons from the 1850s show Young repeatedly emphasizing loyalty to leadership, warning against dissent, and framing unity as protection. So pause and consider this. When survival depends on cohesion, how much room is left for disagreement? As governor of Utah Territory and president of the church, Brigham Young held religious and political authority at the same time. That consolidation mattered. Obedience was no longer only spiritual, it was social, economic, and legal. To disagree with leadership wasn't just to question doctrine, it could mean isolation from the community that provided safety, resources, and belonging. In that context, obedience shifted from voluntary devotion to an expectation reinforced by structure. Was obedience still a choice if the cost of dissent was exclusion? Brigham Young taught that God led the church through living prophets and that questioning leadership risked spiritual harm. He warned against public criticism and framed loyalty as evidence of faithfulness. These teachings shaped frontier Mormon culture deeply. They encouraged discipline, order, and remarkable communal success. But they also narrowed the space for challenge. When authority is presented as divinely protected, correction becomes difficult. If leaders speak for God, who decides when they're wrong? This understanding of obedience carried real consequences. Policies were enforced without public debate. Teachings were accepted without institutional challenge. Members were encouraged to trust leadership even when uncomfortable. Some of those teachings, including on race, authority, and dissent, would later be changed or reframed. But during Brigham Young's lifetime, they stood uncorrected. So here's the uncomfortable question. If obedience requires silence in the moment, but correction only comes later, who bears the cost of being wrong? Over time, the church evolved. Authority remained central, but the language softened. Modern leaders speak more about agency, compassion, and personal spiritual responsibility. That shift didn't happen overnight. It unfolded gradually, shaped by history, consequences, and reflection. But the structure Brigham Young established obedience as institutional loyalty left a lasting imprint. Even today, members often struggle to distinguish between sustaining leaders and never questioning them. Where did that confusion begin? Understanding this history doesn't require rejecting faith. It requires recognizing that obedience is not a fixed concept. It changes with circumstance, leadership style, and institutional need. Brigham Young didn't invent obedience, but he redefined it. He transformed it from shared commitment into organized compliance. And that transformation helped the church survive. It also created tensions the church still navigates today. So the real question isn't whether Brigham Young was right or wrong. It's whether the version of obedience he shaped still serves the church or whether it needs to be understood differently now. Is obedience about trust or about silence? Unity or uniformity? Faith or fear? History doesn't give us simple answers, but it does show patterns. And one pattern is clear. Brigham Young changed what obedience meant, and the effects of that change are still with us. How should obedience function in a living church led by fallible people? Does faith require unquestioning loyalty or thoughtful engagement? If you believe church history should be examined carefully, honestly, and without fear, follow for more. And share your thoughts below. This conversation matters.